thoughts on how you want to get started?
No.
No.
I feel totally unnatural and strange at the moment.
Okay, that's cool. So we are here today to kind of discuss writing and what we think the motivations and backgrounds of, collecting the subconscious state of mind to be able to put together a piece of writing.
We're automatically drawn, I believe, to natural storytellers. There's always the guy by the water cooler, or there's always the kid even that can, set up a story, if you like, and they do it unknowingly. You could argue unknowingly, but there's an argument, or it's a fact that from birth we're disciplined, we're programmed to accept a story in a certain way. Mm-hmm. The ancient Greeks said that the basics of story writing apply to all of us. Mm-hmm. We want to know the setup, we want to know the inciting incident, and we want to know the payoff. And that's why good storytellers are able to include that even in a short little monologue. If somebody's telling about what they did that weekend, or children are trying to explain to you, you'll get that one child or that one person that seems to be able to evoke your imagination in a stronger way than other people might. And I think you can learn that, mm-hmm. but I do honestly believe that good storytellers are born. It's innate.
Yeah.
It's the same way with teachers or police officers. You can go to and study that particular sphere of professionalism or discipline as much as you like, but it's that last little 5% that certain people have that others don't.
Yeah.
And that's what sets great storytellers apart from everyone else.
Yeah.
I don't know about it. I'm just sort of speculating, but just in my experience, I think there's a definite skill and knack that can be acquired, but some people just have it. Mm-hmm. Regardless of education, regardless of socioeconomic background, they've just got this ability to hone into the human elements of a story that make it interesting and applicable to all of us, and just run with it.
Because I've always thought that the stories that I loved the most, or the writers that hit me the most, like Kurt Vonnegut or something, to me, the hook goes into the meat. Like there's something like gravitationally bound to connection that happens with certain writers that you're just like, wow, these other books are like information. And then this one is, like you said, by the water cooler. All of a sudden, like the cubicles disappeared, everything is gone. And then all of a sudden this image is hanging there. And there's like a profound subconscious curtain, I think, that is established through storytelling. The way that we maybe grow up with, like, the way that our parents tell us stories or our friends tell stories, and how that just evolves. How did that come to you? Like, at what point were you a storyteller when you were a kid, or were you just kind of like sit back and then somebody like, at what point did you go from spectator to creator? Because that's interesting to me.
I had a fairly uneventful, in terms of success, uneventful childhood within the context of the secondary schooling system within the UK. But the only thing I ever remember is when I achieved anything other than complete blandness was when my English professor would pull me to the front of the class to read one of my short stories. Mm-hmm. And that, for me, felt incredible for somebody that was quite unremarkable in other areas. I certainly wasn't, physically capable at that age. I certainly didn't excel in any other area, but, I was able even then mm-hmm. to, hold people's attention, and so, and it's only in recent years when I started writing consistently that I actually remembered back to those days when my mum reminded me. She said, "Well, you used to read your stories out to the class," and I thought, "Oh yeah, I did," and so a mental thank you to Mrs. Gray Jones. I'm sure she's not with us anymore, but she really motivated me and started grooming me, I believe, at that age by giving me some sort of recognition, and having moved away from or never really gone near anything sort of creative during the context of my working life, you're being a soldier and a police officer and doing various security gigs around the world. One thing I've always had in the back of my mind, it's a terrible thing to say, that I've actually survived or thrived in situations because I'm trying to put it within the context of a story or a film. So, I've been in some sticky situations and I've actually thought, well, what would the hero do right at this moment?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember talking about that.
It's a survival mechanism, it's a sort of cathartic detachment where I'm actually applying, something fantastical to a real life situation, and it's actually helped me get through some really sticky times. If this was a story, what would happen now? What would be the ideal outcome? What could I do that would look good on the screen?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's all kinds of like this mind over matter mentality that came from, I don't know, like the 80s and the 90s, where you can achieve something by first visualizing it, and you have to, there's always, you got to see it to believe it kind of a thing, but you also have to believe it to see it too, it's like to a degree. If you want to have any kind of success, whether it's, a small step in this particular day or like a large scale thing, you almost have to just imagine that it's already happened.
Yep.
In a sense. So to me, that it's just the stick in the carrot, and that's just like what you're constantly doing. And that's why I think, and we've had the conversation before about how powerful fiction can be.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think whether you call it the law of attraction or positive affirmations or whatever, however you want to call it, you've definitely got to seize the moment in visualizing it and making it real. And I think when I'm writing a story, I actually believe in the characters quite often because they're a composite of people that I've actually met at different times, and so the more real I can make it in terms of the setup, especially within the context of a short story, the more real I can make it in the context of the setup, the more believable it's going to be, and the more gravitas and impact it's going to have when people actually read it. I mean, you never want a sort of bland reaction. It's true what they say. You either want somebody to say, "Wow, I really like that," or "That really disturbed me," or you want something to click with somebody.
Yeah, silence is the worst critic, right?
Exactly.
Like when you tell a joke and there's just nothing happens, it's like the worst.
And a good short story is, I believe, in my humble opinion, like a joke. There has to be a very quick setup and a good payoff, enough so that it sticks in people's minds. If you think of people like Ray Bradbury, they're able to elicit that within a short story. Or even if you go look at the selected short stories of D.H. Lawrence, it may not be what a lot of people would gravitate to, but in a very subtle, organic way, he sets up the tone, the story, and there's normally a beautiful payoff at the end. And again, thank you, Mrs. Gray Jones, for making me read those books, because I wouldn't have approached them otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting step. So do you remember when you actually went from back to that original idea, from spectator to creator? Like, is there a switch in you that was like, this is mine now?
Yeah, it was, I'd sort of, after being in the army and the police, I sort of bummed around parts of the globe doing security jobs and not settling on anything per se. And coming to Canada, I tried to study in a professional vein social work. And at the end of the first term, my prof took me to the side and she said, "Carl, you're never going to make it as a social worker, but you can write." And she directed me to the unfortunately now defunct Canadian Screen Training Centre. and she said, go and do a summer course in writing, and I did. I took her on her word, and I went along. And that's a wonderful thing about Canada that I don't believe you get anywhere else, is the way that it nurtures people at any stage who want to sort of dive into something creative. I went along. I did the summer course in writing and screenwriting, and everything just fell into place. And I realized then, from a cathartic, perspective as well, personally, that the more I wrote, the better I felt.
Mm-hmm.
And I would take, tragic, exciting things that maybe have happened to me, and by putting a supernatural twist on them, I was able to compartmentalize them mentally and use them, more effectively, and feel better about things in general.
Mm-hmm.
But it was definitely that, that one professor that pushed me towards, writing again after all those years of basically not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, we all need those people. And if you've even got the slightest inkling that you should be writing or doing something creative, you should do it.
Yeah.
Whatever the discipline, be it pottery, be it, if you're sitting there thinking, I'd love to draw, then draw, because there's some part of you that is yearning to be nurtured. And I think you have to listen to that part, because you don't want to get to 70, 75 and have these regrets for something so simple.
Yeah.
We can't all go traveling around the world. We can't, meet all the desires that we have, but some of the simple artistic things that we feel drawn to, do them, because you never know where it might lead.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned like supernatural or superpower things. There's like a reoccurring substance to the things that I've read of yours, and there's an unreality to everything. Or not to everything, but there's an unreality to things, and I don't read a lot of fiction. I don't even really enjoy a lot of fiction, but when there is fiction that I do pick up and get pulled into it, it's like very similar to the things that you're writing is kind of reach out to me in a way. What makes you go in that direction, do you think?
Again, it's some life experiences, and it's nature nurture. It's some life experiences, and it's some events that have happened that get you to start to question.
Can you talk about any events like that, or is it too personal?
Life experiences. My grandmother and I used to sit up late and watch the Hammer House of Horror, which was really big in the UK at the time, back in the day. And I'd be awestruck by the horrific stories of Frankenstein, the werewolf, the mummy, and it riveted me in such a way that you wouldn't believe. And I was quite a sickly child, so when I was younger, so I spent a lot of time reading comics and books, and I was drawn towards horror.
Like, how old were you when you
11, 12.
Okay.
I was drawn towards that type of fare, and it really appealed to me, and to the extent that it almost became the main component of my social life, if you like, which meant that I wasn't socializing as I should with other kids, and then I found comics, Batman comics, Marvel, DC, and my parents very quickly took that away from me because they thought it was a negative influence, and they celebrated the fact when I started to cling on to Greek mythology. And for me it was the same thing. It was superhuman people doing superhuman things within the context of these wonderful, tragic, horrific stories. So I was still being sated in that respect. I was still getting what I wanted, but it was in a classical realm, so it was deemed to be acceptable. And then you move through life, and undoubtedly the reason why I started writing supernatural and horror stuff in the last 15 years or so was the death of my firstborn child, and that sort of sent me searching and thinking about possibilities and exploring religions and talking. I went through a period of about 6 to 8 months where I talked to as many religious leaders from as many religions as I could to try and get some sort of answer as to why my son had been taken away from me, to make sense of it. and I came up short,
Yeah.
basically. And ironically, one of the nicest things that was said to me during that troubling time when I was looking for answers was, a little old lady said to me at the airport one day. She said to me, he was just an old soul who needed to top up on love before he moved on again.
Mm-hmm.
And it still, hits me in the stomach when
Yeah.
I just think about her, saying that to me, and it gets you inquiring about possibilities about how we perceive religion and the other world and other things, and not in a sort of Pollyanna manner.
Yeah.
Things don't always work out for the best, and not everything's a Hollywood ending.
Right.
And within the context of my writing, I certainly don't adhere to that. But I like to put forward the thought or the notion that there is hope and that there's always something that can come of any given situation.
Mm-hmm. Like, I was thinking earlier about this genre. I sent you that interview, right? And,
Yeah.
And there was this. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting question. They're talking about even like the idea of like a romance novel. Like somebody like going into a specific field to captivate people with that tool or something. Like what is it about that genre? I mean, do you specifically go out to write that genre, or is it just like?
No, I it's just what I'm drawn to
Uh-huh.
naturally. I'd say my stories range from supernatural to horror to strange.
Uh-huh.
Quite often they're intertwined. I purposely don't go for full out gore.
Right.
I've written a couple of stories that could be deemed to be gory, but it's a sort of byproduct of the story, if you like,
Yeah.
not the reason for as some films are. The reason for the film is the gore. It's definitely a byproduct of the story or the character. And I think visually as well, and that helps because I initially started writing short stories as a way of fleshing out ideas and characters for scripts, and then they sort of became to have a life of their own, and I enjoyed the format and the whole premise of writing short stories. But yeah, I'm fortunate enough to have an agent, and she laments the fact I don't write things that are more budget friendly or Canadian.
Yeah.
She said at times, and I've tried and I just can't. Literally, and I'm not being dramatic when I say it, but literally the stories I write are what I've got to write at that moment in time.
Yeah.
The stories, they're there, and I've got to write them. And it sounds a bit corny and cliche, but it's true.
Yeah.
I can't sit down and write something else. It's literally what I've got to get out at that moment in time.
Yeah, it's like when you're hungry and you want to eat something, you're just like, I have to eat like this. Like nothing else is going to suffice. It's like, it's not like it's Taco Tuesday, but we're going to have curry tonight. And you're just like, we should probably have tacos.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
because I mean, there's like a deep yearning, and I feel like I connect with a lot of your stories because there was like a part in my mind, like also from a very similar age of 11. I don't know, maybe something happens to your brain at that time period, but where I just was fascinated with horror. Like I was fascinated with the darkness and like the unknown and those spaces that bring about an uncontrollable sense of fear. And I don't know if I felt like welcoming that into myself was like trying to test my limits or something to make me like less afraid of something, or like it was just like, holy crap, this thing scares me. So maybe if we pour it on, I'll like,
become desensitized almost.
Become calloused, to a degree where you just
and therefore protected.
Yeah, and like you can't hurt me, you can't scare me, you can't bring me down,
Yeah.
And it's like you sit there and you're like, oh, there's a monster under the bed, and then you get to that point where you just like dive under the bed and you're like, what you got? You just like bring it and your heart's beating like crazy. But there's like that sense of going like in the tribe, going from like the child to the man, where you just like go into the unknown, you go into that darkness and you lead, to try to see how far you can go without like slipping off the edge and being engulfed in it. And I think that's like a really a powerful line to draw, because like now when I like if I go to watch something that's supposed to be scary, like it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of incredible attempts at creating suspense, which can, they can make you jump or something.
And quite often, especially within the context of film, unfortunately, these are created through, technology as opposed to actually good writing.
Yeah, yeah.
And I heard an old adage that came out that unfortunately, movies in Hollywood are made by accountants, whereas in the old days, movies used to be made by people who love movies.
Yeah.
And it's far easier to make Spider-Man 3, 4, 5, and 6, which I love, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's far easier to make those than it is to take a chance on a new director or a new direction, or risk the amount of money that we're talking about for making a feature film.
Yeah, I saw Elon Musk just tweeted the other day. He said, or it might have been a Monday or something. He was like, just release the sequel already. That's what you really want. You want the second and the third and the fourth one. It's like, just skip the first one, because that's where the heart and soul is put in, right?
Yeah. That's
like the first one is always the lowest budget, but with the most blood, right?
Yeah.
And then after it takes off, then you have like, these, massive capacity to do things, but then there's just, it's missing some texture, right? Because when I was thinking about it earlier today, even one of the most classical, I think it might have been like an Alfred Hitchcock story, was called Gaslight.
Yeah.
I don't know if that rings a bell.
Yeah.
And when I first read something that like when you sent me something and I first read it, that was like one of the first things that came to my mind was Gaslight. And I was just like, here's this room with not a lot of effects, not of a lot of things going on, but there is a room. And I could feel that room, and to me that was like a switch went on of like, this is not just like a normal story. This is something that I would want to share, and it's funny because when you sent me The Attic, I was reading it to my kids, right? Because it's not like a kid story, right?
Yeah.
But what I was doing is I was kind of like glossing over parts.
Okay.
They love this kind of like story. So when I got near the punch, I was just kind of sweeping over it and creating details that weren't there, But they loved it. They loved the descriptions. They loved, like, I felt like I was looking out the window. I felt like I was seeing the things going on, and I felt like my kids could see it too. And we were just sitting there. And I don't know if you noticed it today, my son, when he came in, and he said, "That's Carl from The Attic."
Really?
Did you hear him?
No, I did.
He said that. Like he was like, "That's Carl from The Attic."
How did you superimpose another punch at the end, because the end's quite horrible, even though
like I was one eyeball was reading here, one eyeball was reading here, and I could kind of see what was coming up.
Right.
So I would I don't know, sometimes my brain works really fast with just being able to remystify something in a different category, and just kind of misplant what's going on, So they're in the room and there are these vases, and I was like describing this thing, and I knew where it was kind of going, but also it was my first time reading it, so it wasn't like I proofread it, and then it was so then I started to kind of get this idea of where it's going, and then I started to just create padding around it and skipping over parts, and like, and because my daughter's 12.
Yeah.
So she's that I mean, that's when it hit us, right? Yeah. So it would hit her if it went too deep too fast, but the gaslight aspect of it, the fact that you could feel the floor under your feet, and you could see the boxes in the room, and you could feel the voices, and you could hear what was going on. I think that, like, if it connects with the child, then there's, like I said, with the hook, there's some kind of like hook in it that makes sense. So where you could feel like it's coming from a place that is very like home, you know? So where does that, like, are there other writers that you are looking into now that kind of give you a similar feeling like that? Or do you feel like you're on this like peninsula by yourself, or like, how do you feel about it?
At the risk of sabotaging this whole, podcast, I've got an awful confession to make, and that is, in the last few years, well, the last 15 years since I started writing again, I've actively not read other authors.
Oh, nice.
It's a terrible thing to say, but
no, it isn't. I think
I really don't want to subconsciously plagiarize or borrow from, and I'm not saying I haven't been affected over the years from what I've read, but I really don't want to lean towards any particular style, or I'd like to think that everything I do because I used to love Stephen King and Dean Koontz and everything else, but everything I do now is for better or for worse is mine.
Yeah.
And therefore I'll, if it becomes successful, then I'll live or die on the merits of my work, and I can't lay claim to anybody else's style not working for me or anything else. This is just what I do, and I don't know where it comes from. That's the other, in terms of the detail. And I do. In some ways I do, because I say I write visually. So I'm always writing with a film in mind, because the film's playing out in my head.
You can see the camera. You can see.
Yeah, I can see where the camera would
and everything.
Yeah, where under what the lighting would be, and what the kids look like, for the attic specifically. And the little details such as the pajamas they're wearing, and the position of their hands, and little things like that would make up, if it was a still picture, would if you could do a still picture of the attic with the characters in it, it would almost tell you everything about the innocence and the awfulness as well, about that place. So I've always got it there.
So do you feel like, because you do kind of take like this island approach, is it harder to engage like an agent? Is it harder to engage because somebody's like, oh, we want this scary movie, but we want it this way? Like,
yeah, I mean, I always, they say write what you know, and I continually go back to that. I'll be honest with you. I tried writing an episode of, various comedy shows and more standard fare as a sort of spec script, and stories that might be more mainstream, and it dries up very quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, the stuff that, the story that you first read in mind, the first script you read in mind about the SWAT tactical team, drawn into the set, 9 Circles of Hell. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's fantastical. Probably unfilmable on an average budget, but it was just what I had to write.
Yeah.
Because I'd been looking at Dante and I like mixing genres as well. I mean, I like the whole notion of From Dusk Till Dawn that Tarantino did early on, where you're actually taking one genre of a heist movie, and then all of a sudden you throw people into a vampire horror flick.
Right.
I like messing with people's heads in that respect as well. And going back to the attic, that's what I like about the attic myself, is the fact that you start off very gentle with these kids, and you take people somewhere. People have got a sense of what it's going to get dark, as you said, that you knew it was going to get dark, but they don't, not quite sure how dark and in which direction.
Right.
And I think that's first of all, I think it's important when you're writing, but especially with the genre that I write, but also it's inevitable as well. It's
so like how much of how much of it is fiction though? Like, I mean, is it fiction in your head, or is it just like extended realities?
Some of these stories that I write about, I take an actual experience, and I purposely, as I mentioned to you previously, I purposely put a supernatural or horror twist on it because
Right.
it makes it more accessible and more easier to deal with mentally. The fact that anybody could harm children to that extent is horrific, but if you add another dimension to it, then it doesn't make it more palatable, but it makes it easier to absorb by the average person's psyche who just can't comprehend some of these things. And I had an experience that I've just started writing about. I had an experience when I was doing security jobs abroad. I was looking after this rich Arab guy, and he in the south of France, and quite often he would fly back to London, literally just for a day's work or a shopping trip on his private jet. And this one particular day, I was told that he was leaving to take him to the airfield, and we got on a plane and we flew over to North Africa to Morocco, and we landed at a quite innocuous little airstrip in the middle of nowhere. And while we were sat there, it was basically just a windsock and a porter cabin in the middle of the desert, sort of thing, and a convoy of cars turned up, and it was what you might see on BBC World News: a couple of pickup trucks, some very mean-looking guys with AK-47s, a black Mercedes, old black Mercedes with blacked-out windows in between, and the old boy from the black Mercedes got out, and he got into the airplane with my client, and they chatted for an hour, and then he got out, got back in the Mercedes, they went off, we got back in the plane, and we flew back to the south of France. And I never knew what the meeting was about, and I never knew why we didn't clear passport control or customs or anything. And it was a wonderful scenario if you think about it for a movie. So therefore I take something like that and I play with it, and I think, who else has done this? And then you check back through history and you find that people like the Dalai Lama, Winston Churchill, JFK, they've all had these periods of unaccounted time in their lives when they've just disappeared, disappeared from public view. And Churchill used to have a body double, and the Dalai Lama would just sort of cancel his schedule for a while, and these people go missing. So in my mind, they all go missing up for a purpose, and they all travel to this remote Moroccan marketplace where they're taken to a special building, and in my mind they're taken there because they're all introduced to their guardian angels. And that starts the basis of a story for me, that all these people that have achieved great things within the context of their personal life, professional lives, are given the opportunity to meet their guardian angel. And in my story that I'm writing now, the one character that's who basically gate crashes his way into this little hamlet, this town, and has the gift. He basically blackmails the gift out of the owner rather than having it bestowed upon him, and how this goes wrong terribly. So yeah, all these things happen to me in one way, shape, or form. They're experiences, and then because of the imagination I apply to things, I just run with them after that. And it's just something that I do now automatically.
Yeah, that's nice. That could go so many directions, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's amazing. That's crazy. Yeah, I think we often live in this like really how do you say, like really sanitized everything, like not just in like a virus sense, but it's just like everything is just boxed and prepared all the time.
Yeah.
That when you get a situation like that,
within the context of storytelling or films or
just
both,
life in general, it's just
yeah.
like, it's like you go to sometimes you go to people's houses and, or you sleep over, or you share some kind of like intimate times, and you see like, they're eating like cereal out of a box. They're eating this out of a box, and they're doing this out of a box, and everything is just out of this box. And it just feels like everything is just boxed. And then when you have this experience, which is contained of boxes, but then like there's this, there's an edge of a cliff somewhere there where you do just kind of disappear, where you're not like in this space. I always think of, like rites of passage, that you would read about where, maybe in like a jungle or something, like kids were just left out there for like a week to just kind of survive, and if they got eaten by like a puma or something, then they're just done for, right? But
Yeah.
like when you come crawling back, maybe it's like eat a bunch of mushrooms or, live in a tree or whatever. But then when you come back, there's a new sense of reality in your mind. There's a new sense of what the world means.
So you're saying that I had to go through that in order to write?
No, it's just saying, like, I feel like that connectivity to that place comes through in the writing. Like there's this place that's not really necessarily in the box. I think that's what draws me to it, where I feel maybe the experiences that you've had that have been outside of the box. I mean, I can understand to some degree what it might be to lose somebody. I've lost a grandparent, but to lose a child, there's no way I can fathom that, to have something in close to you that is like a rare concept, whether it's a trauma or whether, it's like winning the lottery or something, like the idea of something having an impact on such a deep level, good or bad, that you have difficulty sharing with large groups of people. There's something about that experience that is almost like I don't want to say like sage-like, but it's just like when you have a community of people and like the one guy saw a tiger and nobody else ever saw a tiger before, and they're like listening, like, what did it look like, And then the guy's like, hocus pocus, because do tigers really exist? Nobody's ever seen one, like, and like how much of this is he making up, right? So you're like on this border where people are wondering if what you say makes sense, or does
Right.
it make sense, or does it not make sense? But it happened to you. It's like there's this thing that happened to you. You were there on the tarmac. You were watching it, probably wondering like, what if one of those guys jumps off the truck and charges us? Like, what if, right? Like you got to be ready for a situation, right? And that could cause a lot of like panic and anxiety
Yep.
that you hold up into you now. So some of that is spread around in the attic. Some of that is spread around in like other stories. Some of that's spread around in your day-to-day life, where it's like you take certain things to a degree of seriousness that other people don't,
Yeah, it's called PTSD. But
I mean, it could be.
I'm being flippant there, but yeah, you definitely shoulder these experiences, and the, in terms of a rite of passage, it's one that's forced upon you. It's not one you take on
Right.
willingly. And I'm just lucky enough to, have the cathartic outlet within the context of writing to do something with it.
Right.
Even if I never achieved, the degree of success that I'd like to within the context of my writing, where I can write full time and not worry about anything else. I recognise what a benefit it's been to me to have been able to reframe and fantasize about some of the experiences I've had. Sometimes put happier endings on them, and sometimes put sadder endings on them, depending on where I feel the story goes.
Do you feel like there are philosophical themes attached to these things, or do you think of it in those terms, or?
I know there are, but I think when you're in the moment and you're writing, you're not capable of fathoming them or identifying them clearly. It's I remember being at art college before I joined the army, and I remember doing art history and how they dissect pictures and paintings from famous artists, and quite often the artists themselves weren't able to verbalize what was actually happening because they didn't have the the distance from the project in order to, everything should be analyzed within the context of what was happening in that person's life up until that point and what they're experiencing. Certain artists produced great work when they were drunk all the time. Others had to have broken hearts, and I think, I think it's not always obvious to the artist in whatever discipline what's actually happening. It needs somebody to stand and say, well, like you've said to me, well, that probably means so and so and so and so, and then I'll get it, and I go, yeah, that's what I was aiming for, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you that when I sat down to write. It's very much a subconscious process, I believe.
Yeah. Like how much, when you're putting these things together, are you like are you constructing them to be communicable? Do you think?
Definitely, yeah, because I've got my mind on a finished product, a film, or a story that's engageable. From everybody, or taps into. There is an element to me. I wouldn't be honest if I said I do like to shock people a little bit, which is why I'll take a story down a certain path, and at the last minute I'll veer off to the right or to the left. Because you're always looking for, because everything is so tired and repetitive within the context of so much storytelling these days. That it's only generational divides that actually allow you to keep repeating certain formulas, because one generation moves on, they become jaded, but fortunately there's a whole new breed of people coming through at a certain age and point, and you can feed them the same stuff again, and that's the problem with so much of storytelling these days. That's why I'm always very interested to see how they remake a movie, and people will say, "Oh, I really enjoyed that movie." Well, did you see the original? Quite often they haven't, and they miss all the salient points or the beauty of the original, albeit far simpler and far cheaper in terms of production, and you miss a lot. But some stories are worth repeating, and others should be. I believe in this sort of cultural Darwinism, where if they're not worthy, then they'll die out anyway.
Do you feel like? Do you feel like these stories are built for film only, or do you feel like it could be on TV? Like, is there some way that it could be like a mini series or something? Or
yeah, I mean, obviously, any writer they'd be lying if they didn't sit there and say they fantasize about how their work could be played out. And I definitely feel within the context of my stories, they play out somewhere along the line of what Jordan Peele's doing with The Outer Limits at the moment, maybe, where each would stand alone, but in a series or succession, because they've all got the same sort of ethos or tone, sort of thing, and I do imagine them like that as well.
Yeah, I think with the development of technology now, it's nicer, or it's easier to have like a nicer, smaller project, than. I think back in the day, like when we were the Stephen King interview I sent you, I mean, you could have a massive production and it could just suck.
Yeah.
Like you could have like, I don't know, even if you had $10 million behind it, you could still just totally miss the point.
Yeah. I mean, Stephen King's. It's funny you should mention that. He's a classic example. How much of his stuff doesn't transfer well to the big screen, or didn't originally?
Yeah.
That people just miss the mark. And so in some ways, the more successful the writer, the harder it is to carry over into film or television what they've actually accomplished.
Yeah.
And the more detailed the work as well. That's why it's harder. That's why not many people know that it's a lot of films are actually start life as short stories rather than novels. The reason being is you give the framework to a screenwriter or a director or a producer, and they can build on that. They don't like to sit there and have to take away elements of the story to come up with a finished project. That's far harder to edit a great story or a great series of stories, because eventually you end up just throwing money at something to make it work, and that doesn't work. That's why a good short story like The Shawshank Redemption, something like that is easier to build on, and the notion is easier to expand, because you capture somebody's imagination and they'll run with it.
Yeah.
because in the same way you were able to edit and diversify my story for your children, somebody else could take my story and take it in a slightly different way
Right.
to expand on it or narrow certain elements, and that's fine.
Like uh, there was a period of time where I was reading The Shining. Like, I don't know if it was a screenplay or something. It must have been a screenplay. I was using it in one of my classes, and when I was reading through it, there's so much more information about the actual Shining and what The Shining is
Yeah.
and how The Shining works. Like, there's all those other scenes with the woman in the bathroom and like the hallway and the carpets, and even like riding through the carpet. That, like, those scenes are way longer, right? In the screenplay or in the whatever version I read, like, that was so much more fascinating to me. Like, if it would have been focused a little bit more on like the actual Shining itself and what that was, being able to communicate in like this realm. And I think that there's not that I don't know if it could ever happen, or I don't believe or disbelieve, but there's something really wonderful about being able to take that kind of an element of a story. And maybe Stanley Kubrick had his own idea of how he wanted it to unfold, but then you can mobilize the ideas of a part of a story like that, and to really just like augment it into the space that's makes sense for like today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess it would feel weird if you had this awesome story, like let's say The Attic or something, and then somebody just like took like one little idea of it, like, oh, kids in an attic. Okay, we'll give you this TV deal, but then there's going to be these kids in this attic, and it's going to be funny. Like, they just turn it
Right.
into like, like the Little Rascals, and you're just like, but it's not the Little Rascals, right? Like,
But anybody in my position would be. It's a terrible thing to say. There's an element of selling out
yeah,
initially. You just want to sell that first big story,
right.
and then after that, what you want to do is then use any momentum or traction that you've actually gained to exercise some leverage, so you can control more of the process.
Yeah.
That's why directors carry far more weight with their projects, and they're able to see their vision through all the time. You always run the risk. If I publish my short stories as a collection, then that's what they are, and I've got the word out there that this is what I intended. And if somebody would take one of those and decide to pay me for it and then bastardize it within the context of how they want to present the story, I don't care. It's a terrible thing to say, but
No, it's good.
there's a mercenary element there as well. You can't be precious about your work.
Yeah.
Is it going to sit at home in a drawer until I die, and then my kids will probably send it to the tip, or is somebody going to take it, read it, and at least consider it in some vein and give it life in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, it's such a weird game, huh? To just like, it'd be so much more interesting if there was just a table of people that were just like, let's make something awesome. Like that, when you're young, you think of it that way, right?
Yeah.
You think like there's a bunch, there's like some, there's like 10 guys or, a group of people sitting in a room saying like, let's make something amazing, So like, get me something amazing, right? But then it's just like, I don't know. Like, it's like you said, the more famous the writer or whatever, the harder it is for that to translate into something good. It's just like you attract all the wrong things, So the guys with the hundreds of millions of dollars are going to attract everything that they end up just choosing, like the least of all evils within themselves. They probably get like 50,000 scripts and have no idea. Everything is just like a bastardized version of like Forrest Gump or something like that. They're just, everybody's trying to make money. So it's just so hard to like, boom, it's so hard to hit something.
I mean, I've been fortunate enough to have people like you read my stories and give me some positive feedback, but I'm not the only one. That I honestly believe, there are so many good writers, potential writers out there that just haven't got a voice in terms of a platform where they can actually do something with it. For years, I wrote and did nothing with my stories. I can't tell you the amount of stories I've actually thrown away. I threw away a novel, 70,000 words, because I thought, well, this is ridiculous, Carl. You didn't go to university, you didn't study creative writing. Nobody's going to even give you the time of day. And one day of particular despondency, I hit erase on the computer.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, and it was gone, and it'll be forever gone.
Man.
And it's a funny game. It's I don't know. If I had my time again, obviously, they shouldn't have regrets. But I think as a writer, you've always got regrets.
Yeah.
And quite often it's not to do with the artistic element. It's to do with the packaging and how you should be presenting yourself, because not many writers are great at presenting themselves or marketing themselves.
Yeah.
I don't like social media. I don't enjoy the notion, perhaps my life would have been different if I was able to tap into some of the more obvious ways of accessing people that there are now, but it's just not me, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever thought of just making a movie yourself, or is that like trying to put too much on your own shoulders?
I've thought about it, and we've talked about it for one of my other stories that we played with the notion, and it's again, fortunately, technology being what it is these days, you can go out and you make a movie. But with the way I write, there are certain limitations placed on the fantastical elements and supernatural elements that, if you didn't do them justice within the context of good special effects, it would just be cheesy. And any build up within the context of the story to that point that didn't actually pay off would be lost and wasted. And you only get one chance to make a good impression.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that. You can if you come through with your first story or film, people will give you another chance. And if you mess up the second time, they might give you another chance based on the first one. But if you come up with a duff project the first time or something that misses the mark, then you're not going to get another chance.
Yeah.
So it's it's a tough game. I'm quite envious of the youngsters coming through now who are, because I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to technology as well, which doesn't help. But some of these young guys coming through now who can shoot movies on the cheapest and simplest of cameras and who have these wonderful ideas. As we touched on before, I wish I could have gone to film school, come out and started writing and producing and making my own films. But unfortunately, I think it was obvious that on reflection now that I couldn't have even started writing until I'd had the experiences that I'd had to trigger everything that's happened since then. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's a weird sword to dance on, for sure. I remember I visited my brother in California when I think I was 18 or something, and I had a friend going to film school out there, and that's what I wanted to do. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
And my heart was so in it. But then, like, I think that the next semester I went back to Ohio and I took a philosophy course. And I to be honest, I didn't even understand what philosophy was. Like, it just seemed like a neat word. And Professor Goldberg, I remember the first day, and just like it just floored me. Like, it hit me with the stick. Like,
the possibilities.
Just like the fact that people could think like that and talk like that, and that all of the barriers, it almost felt like there were all these like safety barriers that the contemporary time places around us so that we don't get too confused and lose our way. And it was like it was almost like the smoke and mirrors, and you look at it from above and you're saying, okay, these are here so that we don't fall off this way, and these are here so we don't fall off that way. And then as history moves on, just the position of the mirrors change.
Right.
But somehow the dependency on those mirrors seemed really fascinating to me, and now that I have children, I still kind of understand it in the same way. And it's just like, there's certain things that happen where like that mirror still has to be there. There's got to be some smoke there, because if the mysticism isn't captured, or if the mysticism isn't placed properly, it doesn't function. There's too much chaos or something.
There's a brutality that comes with honesty, isn't there? And somehow we have to avoid that.
Yeah. So this just seems to need to be like this constant like routing pattern in order to achieve something. It's always like you fall in love with a girl, you tell her you love her, it's never gonna happen.
Yeah.
In the story, it's like, I love you, and then you guys get married, and then like fly away in a blimp or something. Like, but in real life, it doesn't happen that way.
That's
right?
when your problems just start, when she says I love you too.
Yeah. Or it's just like your engagement with that passion is much stronger if you route it.
Yeah.
And you dance with it, you don't have to neglect it, or you don't have to push it away from you. But, man, like something about just being very honest and open and like almost childlike about something just makes everything vanish, I find. But at the same time, it's that innocence that makes it wonderful, that makes it so powerful,
And that innocence, I used to think that it could evaporate as you got older and you became more cynical. But I honestly believe it can come back. It can come back, and it can come back and go in different times of your life, depending on how you're living and what you're thinking and feeling and what your environment is. And you can recapture it. You're never going to feel the same way about Christmas mornings again. But there's certain awe and wonder that you can feel in life later on about other aspects you hadn't even considered before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so important as well. It ties into with the notion of being a writer. One of the best clips I ever read was no experience is ever wasted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so true. Your worst day, your worst experience, guess what? That's going to have mileage when you start to put pen to paper.
Mm.
And it's just a question of regurgitating how you felt and how it felt mentally, physically, and actually putting that down on paper. And you'll connect with people, because guess what? People have been there with you on that same wonderful journey or terrible journey. And if you tap into that, then you'll have an audience.
Yeah, there's when you can establish like parallels of struggle, there seems to be some kind of bonding structure.
Yeah, it's this irony that writers are these solitary figures, and I'm very much like that in many respects. But in our hankering after being solitary and being left alone to be able to write, what we're trying to do desperately is connect with people through the stories that we're writing.
Yeah.
There's a ambiguity there that it's almost ironic that we are working to connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that we're not going to do it by socializing in the normal ways or through other means. It's through the stories. I don't want to go to a bar and sit there and talk about the latest football game or what's going on in the States at the moment. But I do want to connect with people by writing a story that somebody says that really impacted me, or it took me back to a time when, or the dread that I felt when I read your story was similar to when this happened in my life.
Yeah.
And And that's what I'm trying to capture when I write some of my darker pieces, if you like.
Do you feel like like you just mentioned, like what's going on in like the States or something, like do you feel like that American mentality influences your writing at all? Because I mean, I feel like there's a distinct difference between what is going on here in Canada and experience in America. Like there's a different mindset of the way that people like function. It's not night and day. It's not like black and white or something. Like it's there is a psychological component, I think. Maybe it's just like
I think it can actually be simplified, that whole notion, and reduced down to some very base economic elements. And going back to the fear surrounding children as a father, and losing a child, and having this constant then fear of losing another child or not being able to protect them, and then traveling in America, and I was in it was I'm pretty sure it was in Indiana, at an innocuous little town. I pulled in for a cup of coffee and a burger, and you're talking to the waitress, and she tells you that she's not pouring out her heart. She's just being matter of fact that she's got 3 kids, and she's a single mum. And if the first kid gets sick, she can take that child to the doctors, and she gets medicine, but she always holds on a little bit of the extra medicine. She doesn't give the child the full course of antibiotics, because if the second child gets sick, she wants some to give to the second child, because she won't be able to afford to go back to the doctor. And that sort of fearful living becomes pervasive, and that sort of fearful living does have ramifications. And it elicits certain emotions in people, and I think in some ways we're inoculated to that in Canada. We're very lucky to live and exist in Canada, and I think you've got to travel to realize just how lucky we are, for the most simple of things. And perhaps you say for an American audience, perhaps it is easier to tap into people's fears when they're continually in a fearful state.
I was blown away by the fact that you can manufacture, missiles by the thousands and build aircraft carriers, and then you don't have then people can't go see a doctor. I grew up in the military, in my younger years, and we had Kaiser Permanente, that was the military insurance policy.
Right.
You had a card. You walked in, you showed the card, they swiped the card through. That was it. There was no wallet brought out. So it's I don't know how the military functions now in the States, but I mean, if you as a soldier could just, or, your family could go in and have healthcare, full healthcare, I don't understand why why wouldn't you do that for everyone?
It's mind-boggling
it's crazy
that you can pursue other goals as a nation and not have universal healthcare as one of your main.
I felt a strange anxiety going to the doctor here for the first time. I had healthcare for the first time in my adult life, last year or something.
Right.
And I felt weird going into the the doctor's office and not having to pay anything. It's just show a card. That was it. Of course it comes out of taxes. I'm not trying to glorify the non-payment issue, but the fact is that whether I got that job or whether I got that contract this month or no month or whatever, however your employment function works, you can still go and get something checked out, get a blood test, get this taken care of, get that scanned, not spend a penny. That to me is, and like you said about fear, fear moves people strangely.
So do you think then from an artistic perspective, it's easier to not easier to produce, but it's more understandable why art is produced under the circumstances where you haven't got that safety net, as opposed to where you feel completely safe and insulated.
Yeah, it's like a weird hypocrisy, right? It's like you want life to be more safe, but then like I talked about before, how everything is too sanitary and everything is in boxes and everything is too safe. And it's like, where's that rite of passage line? I mean, is that what America's doing? And they're just like checking you out in the jungle and being like, hope you see a tiger. Like, I mean, it could be. I mean, it could be a part of the way that North American mentality seeks to build the drive in an individual.
But it's been proven, if you go back to the Thatcher Reagan years, and that Gordon Gekko, greed is good, philosophy and concept. They've proven since then. And I say they, and you're not going to be able to narrow me down to a particular body of research because I haven't got the book in front of me. But they've said that it's actually counterproductive. You get far more out of people, and I honestly believe this as a notion in general, based on my travels and experiences. You get far more out of people with kindness and honesty than you get by continually berating them and oppressing them. It's a fact.
Yeah, my wife and I talk about that all the time, like when we're trying to get the kids motivated to do things,
Yeah.
It's so easy to explain what's going on to no effect.
Yeah.
It's like our kids do capoeira like every week, and every Monday they say, I don't want to go, I don't want to go.
Yeah.
And we say, every time you go, you love it.
Yeah.
And you go through the same thing over and over again. But then it's like, how do you break that loop? How do you just be like, yeah, we're going, it's gonna be amazing, you love it, and then at some point, like, are they just gonna fall in love with it? I mean, they loved it. They went today and they were like, that's the best, can we do it on Saturday? And it's like, oh, okay, now we gotta fight them 3 days a week to get going to capoeira, right? So it's just funny how like the mind works like that, because it was like, I don't know, if it was easy to be successful, then I don't know. Like if you wrote your first story and then like all of a sudden somebody was like, let's make a movie.
Well, I mean, that was probably the worst thing that ever happened to me, because the first script I ever wrote was optioned.
Uh-huh.
And then on the back of that, I went out and I wrote a TV show, and that was optioned as well.
Nice.
And I was...
So what exactly does option mean for like people that don't know?
Option means that a producer reads it and thinks he can do something with it.
Okay.
So in order to employ the intellectual rights to that property, he options it. So basically, he gives you a couple of grand, and he says, right, I've got this story for a year, and I'm going to see if I can get any traction within the industry, some financing or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have your first two projects that happens to, you think, well, yeah, this is what I'm meant to be doing.
Yeah.
I enjoy doing it, and this is what I'm going to do. But the naivety is just mind-boggling if you think, because there are so many things that can go wrong between somebody taking an interest in your story and actually getting something made. It is massive to get something made.
Yeah.
For every one story that one film that gets made, there's actually 20 on a shelf sitting somewhere that got made that are never going to be released.
Yeah.
And there are some companies and some organizations, like Miramax used to be notorious for this. The Weinstein brothers, they would actually buy stories they had no intention of making, short stories, poems, novellas, and they would actually buy them to stop other people making them.
Yeah.
So how much, wonderful, rich storytelling have we not been privy to, because these previous companies over the years have bought up stories with the mind to just shelving them.
Yeah. That's crazy. The music industry does that like crazy as well. Yeah. They just like sign, you could imagine like them signing every artist that sounds like Cardi B, and then just like, all right, we'll put you on hold. Here's like, $60,000 and we'll set up a tour for you, right? And then they end up just sitting in their apartment for like 3 years wondering when the tour is going to go down, and it never does, because they realize they don't want anybody competing with Cardi B. So it's like,
they own you for that time. You're not allowed to go anywhere else or do
well,
anything.
they might like, I mean, I think for people starting off, like an album is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. You have to, and if people are doing their own productions and like, doing all the music for it and everything, it's a lot of work. So, generally people going in on it don't have the capacity to do it. That's why
Right.
you see all these artists now saying like, own your masters, learn all the skills, learn how to do it all yourself, so you're not depending on anyone, you know. And it's funny because I was listening to a master class about Werner Herzog, and he was it made me think back when you said you weren't reading books, you know, you weren't reading a lot of stories. And he said that he hadn't seen a film until he was like 11 years old. Never watched a film until he was
Wow.
11. And then even then, like much throughout his life, he just never really got into watching lots of films, you know, for the same reasons maybe that you were trying to establish your own voice. He thought like just be in your own space, just create your own mentality, create your own thing. Make that low budget movie, be the director, be the lighting guy, be the editor. But like you said as well, do the absolute best job that you can,
Yeah.
you know? So you might look at some of his older movies and they may not have like the production value as like Space Odyssey, but they have like an intriguing element to them, right? And there's like this strange element that is signature of what he's trying to achieve. And he didn't go to film school, he didn't go to any of these things, and he just says, you know, dive into it, do it your way, and just keep doing it over and over and over again. So I want to believe that that's the smart way to go, because I think like how we found each other, how we met each other, how we engage each other has a lot to do with just the sincerity that things were from the very beginning, you know?
Yeah.
There was just no BS. Like we weren't trying to like smooth each other over or trying to get each other's attention. It was just like, yeah. And then think like a little lights start going on, and then it's like, yeah, like let's have dinner. Let's come over. Let's get a bottle of wine and let's talk this over. And then like it turns into something more and more. And
It's definitely organic, and it takes like, and you can't force it, can you?
no,
I've tried to force it at times over the years, you know, with other people, but it was, you know, it's ultimately it's false, and it never pans out. You've got to have that mutual respect, and that mutual respect comes from a place of sincerity based on almost pure naivety.
right,
And you know, to have somebody come, like, you know, like you did, you tapped me on the shoulder. I was leaving that night when
right,
at the pitch fest, and I was just about to leave, and you know, you basically tapped me on the shoulder and basically said, "Oh, I like your story, mate," and you know that. And I hung around to hear some of your comments, and then I heard, you know, what you'd done, and listened to some of the stuff you'd done. I thought, my God, this guy wasn't just being nice. He actually knows so much about the creative process, and that gave more impact to what the kind words that you gave to me that night. And I think everybody needs that when they're producing, even if you need to find somebody that connects with you, that appreciates what you're doing, that can give you that little push, because we all need it from time to time, especially in artistic fields, artistic endeavors. And I think it's, you know, the other thing I realize is it's very important to listen to other people's and respect other people's mediums, because I'd never listened to music in the same way until you sent me some tracks, and when you told me where they came from and what they were intending to do, and I actually listened to music for well, not for the first time, but for from that perspective. I'd never, you know, it's like sampling a new food. Or taking a food that you've eaten all your life, and when it's packaged in a different way, and it's this eureka moment. Oh, okay, I get it now. I don't get it with the same palate that you do, because I haven't got your experiences and your knowledge and your education, but I get it a bit more, and it opens up another component, and opens up another aspect to the world that is inherently interesting.
it's you know, I see online like younger people trying to start up, and they're like, oh, who do I contact? How do I get involved with a film? How do I get involved with a screenwriter? How do I get involved with a director and all of this stuff? And you know, it's really difficult. It is an incredibly slow process. You know, there's actually a film composer in Toronto or in the GTA named Adrian Ellis, and he just happened to be a roommate or a friend of my brother-in-law, and they went to McMaster together. And yeah, so he was like, "Oh yeah, I have a friend that does film scoring." And this guy has just been incredibly helpful. Like, you know, I was intimidated at first, but
Yeah.
you know, then he was just like, you know, I'd send him an email and then he'd send me like 7 paragraphs back, and I was like, holy crap, like this is amazing. Like he's just like super nice. He invited me to his house. We were looking over some things. He was just showing me how to like what to do here, what to do there, and I'd never had any kind of mentor before. Yeah, and he said people you meet now are potentially going to have projects in 5 years from now.
Yeah.
They might have projects in 7 years from now. And what they know from you in the initial stages is what's going to bring about the opportunities as time goes on. And it's hard to explain to your partner, to your wife or whatever, like in 7 years, we're going to be doing great, you know,
Yeah.
like it's hard to pay your rent when you're looking that far down the line, but it is also significant to have, to not be myopic. It's very dangerous to just look at a few steps in front of you and to just assume that a big thing is going to happen in the next month or the next 2 months even. That's just unfortunately the riskier way to observe the process. And that's why you can always tell the difference between people that are one-offs and people that can really like extend it and keep putting something out and keep maintaining their form. And you realize like, yeah, that's quality. Like that will sustain itself, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I went through a period when I initially attended a lot of writing courses, and they are beneficial. You know, make no mistake, and you know, a lot of good Canadian writers, producers, they give their time gladly, and it's not for the financial remuneration. They actually want to encourage a new crop of writers and thinkers within the field. And inevitably you'd bump into people that you'd seen on other courses maybe years before, and some people still had the same story that they were touting that they'd had like 3-4 years previously. And I don't know honestly whether it's because they had such belief in that project, that they were ensured they were going to carry it through, or whether they were, it was literally a one-shot deal for them, that you have one idea. I think unless you're waking up almost on a daily basis with a new idea, even if you don't see it through to fruition, or act on it completely, unless you're continually getting those creative juices flowing, I think you're going to have a hard time doing anything creative. I think you've almost got to have more ideas than you've got time.
Yeah.
In order to satisfy your output and your soul. You know, I'd feel frightened if I woke up week after week and I hadn't thought of a new story.
Yeah.
Or I hadn't remembered something that had happened to me, and I thought I can use this way and put a twist on it. Or I'm watching the news and I'm wondering what's the real story behind that, and how could that be drawn out into something fantastical or supernatural or interesting. So I'll know, the time to stop will be when I hit that point, when I'm not getting the new ideas anymore.
That's good. It's like I watched I watched this. It was actually, unfortunately, a really boring documentary. My wife and I went to Hot Docs.
Right.
And I think there was something on like Michelangelo or something. And I fell asleep during it, unfortunately. But the productivity was off the hook. you know, like the skill level. I mean, I remember, some of the works just like blew me away. And you can't take for granted um, that creative push, to be able to sit with it and to be able to go. I mean, you can say right out of the gates, whether you like it or not, Quentin Tarantino is an amazing storyteller.
Yep.
He knows exactly what he wants it to look like, and he can take whatever resources he has and make it come to life.
Yep.
You know, it doesn't mean that all of his films are the best films ever, but they're pretty amazing and they're pretty consistent. So love or hate them, he's gone the distance every single time.
Yep.
And so you're going to want to watch that next one. You know, you're going to want to see that, I think he literally put a number on the amount of films he's going to make in his life, and then he's just going to stop. So I'm looking forward to that next one because of like the focus and the energy.
Yeah, I don't think he went to film school either, did he?
I don't think so.
No. He's.
I saw an interview with him once talking to a woman that he had met way back when he was writing Pulp Fiction, and she was laughing because he just had a cardboard box, I think, just sitting on his little small apartment floor, flipped upside down, and he had this script on there, and he was just going nuts and talking about this script, and he barely had money to even eat.
Yeah.
And she, like, I think she ordered him a pizza or something, and it's just, he was talking her ear off about this story, and that story ended up being Pulp Fiction. So it was like, at that point, it seemed like a mountain to climb, right? But he had this like vision, and it was vivid, profoundly vivid, and that's important to have. I think the intensity that you can put into what you're doing, and I honestly believe that, like, the conversations that we've had and the back and forth about the stories and how the stories are going to evolve is going to establish like gravity for like somebody else who has resources, that's going to be like, yeah, I like that. That's interesting. This is going to work for us. Like, let's start putting this together. So the true test is just being able to sustain this dead time, the time where there is this empty space, and how to utilize it, and how to throw more shadows up on the walls, and to entertain ourselves with what we have now until that comes. So hence, that's what brought us to this conversation, right?
Yeah.
Was like, okay, we did this little recording of the attic. Let's just get it out and see like what people think about it. Let's see how people are feeling about this, like this style. It's October, probably with COVID, there's not going to really be like a,
proper Halloween.
Yeah, like, let's go out and scare people kind of a thing or whatever. Like, but it's a perfect opportunity to be at home, kind of turn down the lights a little bit and kind of just check it out, and to see what's going on in other people's minds and how that can work.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I think it's a cool opportunity to utilize the media formats that we do have, and put that to a test, and just kind of say, hey,
see what happens.
You like the taste of this, kind of a thing. So we had gone through discussing like when we're gonna release this. Have you thought of a date you want to aim for?
No, I'll leave it in your hands, mate. I think that
it's the 7th today. What do you want to do? What's it?
8's my lucky number.
8. Let's do that. Let's. What's divisible by 8? We can do the 24th.
That works.
Let's do the 24th.
Sounds good.
That's 3. That's 3 8s. 3 is a magic number. 8 is the lucky number. So we'll do it on the 24th. So on October 24th, you can expect the Attic audio storybook story is going to be available. We're going to try to put it out on as many different platforms as possible. Yeah, if you like it, say something. If you don't like it, say something. If you are vibing with any element of it whatsoever, just kind of check it out and let us know. All right. We've climbed quite a bit all over the mind on this talk, and I feel like we could just keep going for 100 more hours.
It certainly feels that way. I didn't think I'd be able to do this, but it feels pretty natural now.
That's nice. I think we should do this again, and we do have some more collaborations on the way. There are tons more stories and all kinds of things that we're going to be putting together. Do you have like a website, or do you have anywhere online that people can like come and find this stuff?
No, I as I said before, I'm a bit of a Luddite, and I haven't really mastered the art of self-promotion through any platform. So if you email me, I'll send you a story.
Okay, cool. So do you feel comfortable saying your email here?
Sure, it's innescp8@hotmail.com.
So that's INNESCP number 8 at
hotmail.com.
And if you want a story, just send an email, put your name and where you heard this information from, and bing, you'll get a PDF file or something similar to it, and you can check it out. The stories are quite fantastic in the literal and metaphorical aspects, so I think you really enjoy them. They do kind of reach all over the place and do have a very deep cinematic feel to them. So I wanted to thank you for taking the time to come out here and discussing all of this stuff. I think it's continuing to be a fantastic way to build whatever it is that we're doing together, because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I'm already looking forward to the next time we do this.
Thanks for your time and nursing me through the process, mate.
No problem, man. It's been a lot of fun. I wanted to thank also Marco and the Heart Fuel studio that you see around us, with the lovely coffee and the beautiful table that Marco built himself. And this glorious manifestation, if you look back here, Marco actually built this.
Wow.
I know it's hard to see on camera. This is like 5,000 pieces of wood that he glued and mounted all together to create this 3-dimensional monster. And so we keep meeting interesting people. We keep bumping into interesting situations, and I'm sure fruition is around the corner.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it.
Cheers. All right, you guys have a good night and or day or whenever you listen to this, and we will see you on the flip side. All right? Ciao.